how can we help employees see, how do I know if this place is safe to disclose? And not disclosing at all can be the right move when it's not safe. It's really about setting those lines for ourselves. If you continue to be predictable, you're able to do well, then this disclosure can be a quirky thing, can be a good thing. But how it becomes punished is when, after you disclose, you start being unpredictable. And then that unpredictability that you show becomes punished quietly.
What makes the company would be the people in the organization that interacts with one another on a daily basis, that gives you that safe feeling of, can I share? So with policies, it doesn't match with the organizational behaviors.
Welcome back to another episode of Wise and Shine. I'm Dawn, author of Take Back Control of Your Money, and I'm joined here with Alex.
Yes, this is Alex. You can find me on socials. I am the Nest to Next coach, where I support people through life's transitions, right? In different seasons of life, spiritually, emotionally, as well as financially.
So Alex, today's episode, we want to talk about something that could help equip people in their lives, in their career, in their workforce, and it doesn't really get talked about as much. So before we go on, we want to focus on, and we want to clarify that this episode is really coming from a place of support, how to help all of you out there listening, or maybe your loved ones or friends that you know whom this episode might be relevant to, where we're really talking about how in recent years, workplaces and many professionals have said that they support mental health. But the interesting observation is that these same people would never disclose their own diagnosis at work. And we're not coming from a place of judgment, but from a place of trying to understand and help figure out why is this so, what reasons drive them to do these and make these decisions, and what are they afraid of? Are there better solutions out there? And it does not mean that you have to tell the whole world. Some people choose to, some people do not want to, and we fully respect that. But we want to deep dive into how you have the choice and you have the power. And if anything crops up, how should you learn to work with that in your organization? So I'm excited for today's episode, and to help us unpack this, we have two guests on set. Can we have Mian-Li introduce yourself to our audience who may not be familiar with your work?
Sounds good. I'm Dr. Ong Mian-Li. I'm a clinical child and adolescent psychologist, and I run a clinic on my own where I see kids, adults with ADHD, trauma, depression, things like that. And on the side, I do consult and I teach and I do some research as well. Thanks for having me.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Sharon, and I'm actually the founder and psychotherapist of Starfish Stories. Currently, I've gone to many places to work, and so I work with a rather huge range of denominations, starting from athletes, all the way to military soldiers, and also working with delinquents from the offending side of things. So for me, same. I also teach, and I also do my own practice at this moment of time.
Right, so we're going to get started with the first question. But before that, I want to ask, so mainly on your profile, you're very proudly, you say that you're proudly neurodivergent. Some people may not know what exactly that means. So could we help to get both of you to share a little bit more so that the listeners know what to expect?
So what neurodivergence is a sort of cluster of disorders. But in my case, is that I have ADHD. Being neurodiverse also means that you could have be on the spectrum, the autism spectrum disorder. It also includes things like developmental delays, learning disorders, things like that. What the term really means is that you are wired differently.
And Sharon, in your work, have you ever seen neurodivergence in the individuals that you work with, but they don't say that they are, or sometimes they might not even know that they are?
I think for me, most of the time, clients are all referred to me, and usually they would already be diagnosed with something. And then we work with them through their issues and fitting into the environment for them optimal. Because I think for me, I'm really looking at more strengths based, where everyone has their strengths, everyone has their contribution in the organization, and they can actually still contribute using whatever that they have, even though they are being diagnosed. So I think being in an organization it is important for employers to also recognize that they are more than the label that they carry on.
I want to go down this a little bit further because with people being a little bit more aware that there is such a term, and with more individuals like Mian-Li stepping up to own that and say, yes, I am, people are starting to wonder, am I that too? But not everyone goes to get diagnosed. So I know actually quite a few people around me who think, and like, yeah, I think I have ADHD. I think I am neurodivergent, but they've never gone to get it diagnosed and they just continue living the I think. So have you, in your work, for example, because you've worked with so many different types of people, from soldiers to students, have you seen that some people, maybe someone has not been diagnosed yet, but you can recognize it in them that I think this person is quite likely neurodivergent?
Many, in fact. I guess in the early days, there isn't much of a understanding of what's going on, and most of us are probably undiagnosed in some way. I myself have struggled through school, and finally, I think I have ADHD as well, and probably other learning disabilities. But we just kind of find our little ways, to make things happen through the academic system. And for individuals who has not been diagnosed, my first question will always be: is it necessary at this moment of time? Because it really depends on where their life stages are at already. Because for me, I feel like there's a spectrum, and if it's not affecting you, in terms of affecting your life, your lifestyle, you're still able to carry on with life as per normal, because along the way you would have developed skills to be able to manage. Then I say maybe the diagnosis is not necessary. But if you would like more clarity for yourself to optimize your own performance, then I say, yeah, go and get yourself diagnosed, because you want to answer that question mark that you've always been asking, isn't it? So get yourself diagnosed and see if there's any possibility of using medication or other therapy to help yourself to be better. I think that's also a plus point. So it's really an individual decision at that moment of time, depending on your stage of life as well.
So there's no compromise on the quality of life, but there could potentially be a better optimization
That's right.
of productivity of the individual depending on which stage of life they are at.
Correct. And also to answer the questions that you have all your life, how come I'm just different from others, huh? Right? Or how come, somehow someone can just study or not study and score their A's, and I have to work really hard, but I still don't get it. So I think it's really giving them the opportunity to answer those questions growing up, and giving themselves that assurance that, hey, it's not that I'm bad. Maybe I didn't know how to cope with that situation. I didn't know what better to do.
So in that way, knowing it could sometimes be a solution for them to stop being so harsh on themselves and to understand that we're just wired differently. How can I do better with the tools that I've been given in life? So let's talk about how this shows up in the professional workplace. It's interesting because in recent years, organizations have embraced, many of them, not all, but many have embraced the concept of mental health. And they've been very outspoken for some of them, putting it in their branding messages, their workplace culture, and all the policies that come out. But the reality is that when we hear from people on the ground, they don't feel as supported. And they always say it's easy to say, but I don't see that being done in practice. So I don't feel safe to talk about it. As a result, many high functioning professionals tend to hide their diagnoses. Why do both of you think this is happening?
The very fact that they are calculating this, I think it tells us that sharing isn't necessarily empowering. And in fact, it's a risk. It's a huge risk that employees have to take on. And I think that this comes from them not wanting to share. It comes from a place of being able to read the room too well. That's what I would say. They are high functioning, and therefore they pick up on cues that, wait, you have to be high performing, you have to be consistent, you have to be perfect, you have to be able to keep yourself together. These things are being rewarded quick. And so responding to the room, I think they've just been able to adapt. On the other hand, when one discloses things like this, you introduce variability. Sometimes could come across as you are unpredictable. And I think that fear keeps people from disclosing their conditions, which is there's a lot of reality and truth to that, which breaks my heart, really.
I guess it's also a bit of a learned behavior. We have gone through school educations and stuff like that, and we know what can be said, what cannot be said, and what is the expectation of us. And I think this has become part of us, even in the working spaces. And the whole idea about if you are high functioning professionals, you are like superheroes, and superheroes don't take a break, isn't it? And so when a superhero says that, oh, I am not doing well, I can't cope, you know, that that itself, if we track it back to developmental stages, what would our parents tell us? It's fine, you can do it. You just need to do this. And so there hasn't been rooms to really discuss this through, even at a younger stage. And so it becomes part of you, isn't it? That you feel actually unsafe to talk about it. And you are not given a space to talk about it. For those who have tried to talk about it, maybe when they were younger, it's been shoved aside to say, don't talk about this. You're not bad. You're good. You're in a good school. You're with good friends. And you are doing well in school. So you're good. You're okay.
Count your
Yeah,
blessings.
count your blessings and stuff like that. So a lot of learned behaviors from the younger stages brought into your professional workspaces. And of course, policy wise, we can have everything on policies, but you know that um, what makes the company would be the people in the organization that interacts with one another on a daily basis, that that gives you that safe feeling of, can I share? Can I will it interfere with my performance? How would others look at me? Because you just take one in the room that says, really, meh? You got mental health, meh? That's it. It's a message to the whole organization that, no, this is not a topic to be talked about. Let's just shut down on this. So with policies, it doesn't match with environmental, um, it doesn't match with the organizational behaviors. Yeah. So I think that's where, it doesn't match.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying Wise and Shine so far. I'm your host Reggie, aka your Chief Financial Coconut, and for us to continue to do this show so that you become a tad bit wiser every week, you gotta like, share, subscribe, help us beat the algorithm. But even more importantly, if you can, comment in the comment section below. Let us know your thoughts and also some questions that you would love us to answer. Yep, now back to the show.
I think also because there's no clear playbook that anyone has come up with, right? To say that if an employee uh, doesn't do well because of a particular mental health issue or trait, then where do you draw the line to say that this person has not performed compared to somebody else that did not necessarily have that same issue, but then that person could have other issues, right? But the fact that this person has already been labeled as having mental health issues, then this person is like ranked lower, right? That's a discussion today as well, right? So whether or not you should be talking about it at the workplace, and whether or not your superior, your boss, your employer needs to know, and to what extent should you be judged or graded on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such a great observation, Alex. It's like, I remember when I was in a place where I was so upset and I was really emotional because I was going through a breakup. I would say that my mistakes in that kind of situation would probably be worse than someone with ADHD or any other neurodivergent conditions who made the same mistake. But my boss, when I was going through that phase, would discount that because she gets it, right? Everyone has been through an emotional breakup or something traumatizing in their life where you feel very strongly. But she may not understand how the ADHD individual or the employee feels because she doesn't have that own lived experience herself. So she's more empathetic to one person and less so to the other. But just like how you've observed, it doesn't mean that this person is less or inferior in any way. In fact, I would say I was probably the most inferior one at that point in time because we all have different issues. But because some issues are compartmentalized into a label and others are not. So maybe is that why as well these professionals are so scared to speak up?
I think we need to understand what mental health is really all about. There's a huge spectrum. You have the wellness and those who are really diagnosed with medication. and you may be diagnosed without medication as well, right? So actually, with this whole spectrum, and also acknowledging that every human being goes through emotions, and goes through disturbance at different stage of our lives, breakups, stress over financial, children are not doing well at school. These are all different chapters and different moments that actually that does disrupt the emotions. Of course, for those who are diagnosed, it might be a little bit more, a bit harder to handle. And if they are on their medication, most of the time they function like everyone else, right? And I think there's a lot of awareness being made. But the question is it a conviction? Because if it's just awareness, it's like do not smoke, you get fined, right? We all know that. And so, but is it a choice of the organization to say that because this is an important factor for me as the boss of the company to take note, and performance of my employees depends on the wellness of how they feel, right? Or whether the belonging in the organization, their mental wellness matters to increase performance. Then I, as a boss, would say this is actually important, and I want to put emphasis to it. Then you see that the organizational structure or culture moves towards that kind of treatment to different individuals, and it does encourage different individuals to say you can talk about it. Because you talk about it, we are ready to support you. But how many organizations actually do fully understand what their policy is really about?
Wow, I have so many thoughts about what was just shared. Let me just try to keep it short. think I think the first is to be aware that no one person is at fault. That systems are meant to optimize. So you talk about sort of being commercial, right? So therefore we have resources, how are we gonna use it, right? I think acknowledging that can reduce a lot of blame. Because very often it's why does my boss don't get me? Why is my employee not doing this? But firms are built to optimize, to achieve certain objectives. So I think the awareness piece is so key. Now, as to how do we deal with this? So much that can be said. But for listeners, I think who are listening, most of whom I imagine are employees, I think it's about having that agency. I think Dawn, you sort of shared, you had a breakup and you felt, well, it sounds like you felt comfortable enough to share it. Now, where did that comfort come from? Because you somehow trusted your boss. How can we help employees see, how do I know if this place is safe to disclose? And not disclosing at all can be the right move when it's not safe. It's really about setting those lines for ourselves. From the employee perspective, we can talk more if needed about what can systems do more, what can bosses do more. But I'm very focused on how employees might feel. So it's really about, wait, is this place safe? Do I just overshare? No, the answer is no, we shouldn't.
Yeah, I like that you're saying sometimes the right decision might be to not share that diagnosis, because if it's an unsafe space, you do not want to show your vulnerability because that could be used against you later. And that's probably why some of these folks are unwilling to speak up and share. But then maybe let's draw the discussion to what are some of these signs that they can use to determine whether it is truly safe or not. Because many a times today, the organizations are going to say, we embrace it. Feel free to tell us so we can support you. But whether or not that is really the practice can be hard for someone to try and figure out. What would be your take?
Observe for a while, to see if what's the culture like first. Observe for a while in terms of how does your colleagues actually behaves around one another. Do they talk a lot about their mental health issues? Do they use it a lot? To whether because I can't do this because I have this diagnosis, etc. I think it's really observing the space and exercising discernment, right? Of should I share it or not? And I think if you are daring enough, right, share it and test the ground for yourself. And if this organization is not one that's supportive, then from a mental health perspective, I would say go to another space. Go to another space that will suit you, and go to another space that will optimize your strengths, because you are not your diagnosis. And I usually would encourage my clients, to go to a space that they will be happy, help them to optimize well in their performance, and yet support their mental health. Because if an organization is not on policy again, they have all this, but what is happening is not the case, then no point staying, even though it pays you a lot, because you're going to use all this money to pay, counselors and psychiatrists, I guess.
How I would think about it, as I sort of, if I were to advise an employee, would be I think around power and the patterns in which it's being used. So power being, sure, your direct boss can be super nice listening to you, but who holds the real power when it comes to making decisions? Promotions, things like this. That gives you an indication as to how organizations are responding or reacting to it. As well as patterns. I think Sharon sort of alluded to it. Not the employees, your peers, how they are talking about it, but how is self-disclosure or how has self-disclosure been managed in the firm? Has it been like oh, you're very 可怜, a lot of things are going on, and then it becomes this big whole hoo-ha, which is not that great of a thing because that indicates that the firm doesn't have a lot of experience with it. Versus it's more of like okay, it's a thing. Maybe we have to shift some work here and there, not a big deal. And we will check in from time to time. I think the sort of intensity in which the firm responds around who holds the power and the pattern around things have been done, I think can tell an employee a lot as to, wait, is this a safe space?
I think those are great points. Power as well as
The
patterns.
patterns
and
around
these are driven
behavior.
by culture. And it is not, of course, all of this is driven by the employees and also the people behind the company. But I think boss might change, right? Direct boss might change manager might change, but the culture essentially it stays.
So even for organizations that claim to be supportive, could you elaborate a little bit more to our listeners? How have you seen workplaces quietly punish disclosure? What are some of the ways that this shows up and becomes tangible?
I think the one word I would use is predictability. That's how disclosure is being quietly punished. If you continue to be predictable, you're able to do well, you are high functioning, then this disclosure can be a quirky thing, can be a good thing. But how it becomes punished is when, after you disclose, you start being unpredictable. And then that unpredictability that you show becomes punished quietly. Not in loud ways, because that would be bad for the firm in terms of PR. But it comes in the form of, you are maybe not on this leadership position, or you are left out of a particular discussion. They check in a lot more on you, asking you whether you're okay or not. Are you okay? Is everything okay? There's a lot more focus on how vulnerable you are. As and when the individual affects the predictability and down the line, the momentum of the firm. Again, not a problem with any single individual or boss, but how the system operates. And it's very important for higher-ups to be aware, to be mindful of how systems tend to act against disclosure in this way.
Right. So these are quite concrete examples you've given. Thank you. That really helps of when performance slips after the disclosure. But what if performance remains constant? Sharon, have you seen that show up in any other ways where the performance of that individual has not slipped, but then the organization is quietly punishing them in different ways? And how does this look?
I do, though. I actually do see such behaviors in an organization as well, where you are still performing, but somehow or other promotion is never in line for you, or someone else always is seems to do better, or is explained to you that, oh, this person has done this, and is more than what you have done, and you're like, huh, right? Or uh there's also another form where I've experienced it myself, where uh your bosses might what we call gaslight, and there's this toxic conversations going on where, oh, you need to do this because it's for visibility, if not you will not be put into the rankings. Your direct competitor is this person in the organization, and check out what they are doing, and subtly you are pushing yourself a lot stressing yourself a lot, and eventually you give up because you are like, what's the point? What's the point? Because you've been trying to meet criterias, but deep down you know that, hang on, is this person really much better than me? When you start to clear out and sit down and think about it. So I think it's not that quiet after all, but I guess at that moment of time, you probably wouldn't think that much about it from a toxic environment, toxic conversation, gaslighting kind of uh mode. You would just say, oh, my boss is trying to help me, and they are giving me good advices and good tips, on how to, be ahead of my peers. Um, but really, and that will take you probably 2 years, 3 years to finally realize, no, all this are just lack of a better word, not
And so
necessary.
to sort of build on that, I think I worry so much when disclosure is being conflated with consistency and high performance. So take for instance someone like me. I have the condition that I have, ADHD. Oh, if I continue to do well, oh, he's so creative, so quirky, so interesting. So as long as he continues to perform and do well, then that while it helps the individual, it then becomes misunderstood as, oh, you have this, but you can continue to do well. And then once it starts to tip on the other side, for instance, with anxiety, I'm very stressed. I tend to sort of check things again and then again. Okay, so as long as that means that your work is good, great, we love that. But when that flips and turns into like hesitation at work, not being able to get out of bed, not being able to get to work, then suddenly that becomes seen as a bad thing. Disclosure is only helpful when you continue to be high functioning and high performing, which gets at the core point again around how systems operate. That's my worry.
But I also do see that, it's easier to disclose when you're at a higher level in terms of managerial level as compared to just at the employee level trying to, get operations done. If you are the boss, well, all means, disclose yourself is fine because you're the boss, or you're person in power. I think that's much easier to disclose because the narrative is that I have these issues, I am diagnosed, but you know what? I'm the boss. Is this kind of impression that I still get things together. But when you are an employee trying to get operations done, the disclosure becomes different. That allowance of allowing you to disclose, it becomes a bit different. You'll be seen differently. So
Yeah.
I do see that there's also a difference in terms of which level of which level of position you are in the organization as well.
Yes, that's such a great observation. I was about to point that out too, that the people I know who have actually owned this label and are proud of it are actually the ones on top. Or they at least don't have someone else who controls their destiny. And then when you're on the other side of the equation and there is someone else who controls your promotion, whether you even get to keep this job, how much you earn, then they tend to be a bit more hesitant. And that is where, like you said, maybe because they feel or they deem it unsafe, so they don't go out to disclose that. But I want to understand a bit more. So it could be sometimes the right decision to strategically hide that and not disclose. But what happens for that individual? When people hide a diagnosis for years, what is a cost that they never anticipate until it shows up too late?
Short answer is the depth of suffering that they and damage that they when they just keep it inside in service of the system. So they put it on themselves to change. And the system doesn't have to. Again, so that it gets optimized, right? And the depth, I think what people often miss out is the depth of pain that they go through to the point that it affects all other areas in their life. And when that happens, very natural and understandable at the same time, really heartbreaking because you are literally sacrificing yourself. And so it does damage your own self-esteem and self-worth over time. I think that's the biggest cost that people miss out.
So in other words, you're saying that people are not those who choose not to disclose. They think that they can handle it. They think that they can live with it, but deep down, something is eating it from the inside, and it doesn't show up until years later, where the damage is enough for them to start questioning their self-worth because they've allowed themselves to live through all these years of living as such.
Exactly. And I want to sort of clarify here, the thing to do isn't necessarily the opposite, which is let me share everything. Because then again, it comes down to how safe do you feel? And the safe thing to do could be not to disclose and leave the firm, right? Or talk less, share less. I just want to sort of remind all of us that we do have agency around this as well.
Self-management.
Right. We don't have to buy into.
And I think it's very insightful how both of you have pointed out that the current workplace or organizational environment may not be at the stage that we hope in an ideal world it will be at. And at the same time, individuals, despite this, have that power and agency to decide, would it help me if I make this disclosure? And if it doesn't, then seek the solutions to support you elsewhere outside of your workplace. I think for listeners who, when we started this episode, there was no clear answer. Is it wrong to hide a diagnosis? Should I hide or should I disclose? It feels like I should, but yet I recognize that there are consequences not to. And both of you have been very helpful in unpacking what does this mean emotionally and practically, and what are some of the considerations that people should work with. So for all of you, thank you for spending your time listening this episode with us. And if you have any further questions or anything that you want to ask them that did not get asked through this episode, feel free to reach out to them.
If you're not already following us on our socials, please head on down to www.thefinancialcoconut.com and leave your email address there. We will update you when new episodes are out.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please share this with anyone you think who could help. And hopefully, we will eventually reach a stage in our world where what organizations say and what actually happens in real life start to become more aligned. So neurodivergent folks do not have to feel like they have to hide their diagnosis anymore. But in the meantime, we hope you have given some tools that you can use to help move forward in your professional life. And if you have anything else, please leave us a comment below. We'll see you on the next episode of Wise and Shine.
See ya!